Today I will tell you a story that begins with silence sharper than any insult and a rejection colder than the December snow. When my own son told me I was not welcome for Christmas, I did not argue or beg. I simply walked away quietly, carrying the dish I had prepared with love. 3 days later, his world collapsed, leaving 27 desperate calls on my phone that I never answered. He never saw it coming. My son's Christmas mistake cost him $105 million, but the real loss could never be measured in money. Remember to like this video, subscribe, and join me for more grandma life stories. Here, we share the moments that cut deep, the lessons that linger, and the quiet victories that bring healing. My name is Linda Parker. I am 62 years old, and for most of my life I have been the kind of woman who carried burdens in silence. My husband, Mark, was once a successful businessman in Spokane. He built a logistics company from nothing, and when he passed away 8 years ago, he left me with a fortune to manage. I was never loud about it. I did not flaunt my wealth. I lived quietly in the house we shared, trying to honor his memory and protect our son Ethan, who became the center of my world. That evening, Christmas lights glowed across the neighborhood. The streets shimmered with festive colors, families gathered, children laughed, and music floated into the winter air. I held a dish of honey-roasted chicken, still warm, seasoned the way Mark used to like it. My plan was simple. I wanted to surprise Ethan, his wife Sophie, and share even one quiet meal together. After all, what was Christmas if not about family? When I reached the front steps of their new house, I paused for a moment. The place was grand, its walls freshly painted, windows trimmed with expensive curtains. I recognized almost every detail because I had paid for nearly all of it. From the down payment to the hardwood floors, from the furniture Sophie had demanded to the renovations Richard and Margaret, her proud parents, insisted upon, my savings had built this so-called perfect life. I told myself it did not matter, as long as Ethan was happy. I opened the door gently and stepped inside. Warm laughter greeted me first. The living room glowed under the massive Christmas tree. Ornaments sparkled like jewels. The scent of cinnamon filled the air. Sophie's parents sat on the plush couch, sipping wine, while Sophie herself moved gracefully between the guests like a hostess on stage. The moment they saw me, the room went silent. Sophie froze with a glass in her hand. Margaret's lips curled into a tight smile, the kind that was meant to dismiss. Richard raised an eyebrow, as though my presence had lowered the value of the evening. Ethan walked toward me, his shoulders tense, his eyes darting nervously between his wife and me. He looked like a boy caught between two storms. He reached out, but not for the dish in my hands. His voice cracked at first, but then hardened as if rehearsed. "Mom," he said, avoiding my gaze, "you are not supposed to be here. You are not invited tonight. Sophie's parents wanted a private family gathering. It will be easier if you go." Those words cut deeper than any blade. For a moment, the dish of chicken grew heavy in my arms, as though it carried the weight of all the sacrifices I had made. I felt the sting rise behind my eyes, but I refused to let it fall. Instead, I smiled. A thin, steady smile that carried both dignity and heartbreak. "I see," I whispered. "Then I will not stay. Enjoy your Christmas. May it be perfect in every way." Behind him, Margaret leaned toward Sophie and whispered, not softly enough, "Thank goodness she understands. We would not want disruption." Richard chuckled, swirling his glass of wine. Sophie lowered her eyes, pretending she had not heard. Ethan stood frozen, ashamed yet unwilling to defend me. That silence was the loudest rejection of all. I turned, still holding the dish. The warmth of the house faded behind me as the cold night air struck my face. Outside, snowflakes drifted gently under the glow of street lamps. My hands trembled, but I tightened my grip on the plate, unwilling to let even that small piece of effort shatter on their perfect marble floor. As I walked back to my car, the laughter resumed inside, faint but sharp. Every step away felt like a confession I had not wanted to make. I had given everything, and I belonged nowhere. I placed the dish on the passenger seat, started the engine, and drove into the darkness. That night, something inside me broke, but something else awakened. I had been quiet for too long. I had endured their judgments, their dismissive words, their constant appetite for what my husband and I had built. But this, being turned away on Christmas, was the final lesson I needed. Because kindness without respect is not kindness at all, and sacrifice without gratitude is not family. As I drove through Spokane's empty streets, the lights blurred past my window. I thought of Mark, of his last words to me when he handed me the keys to our life's work. "Never let anyone use you, Linda. Protect what we built." That promise returned to me, sharp as the winter air. By the time I reached my own quiet house, I knew what I had to do. The invisible slap I had received in my son's living room would not end with silence. It would mark the beginning of a reckoning neither Ethan nor his in-laws could ever imagine. I stood in the center of that polished living room, surrounded by every surface and every corner that had been bought with my money, my sacrifices, my trust. The gleaming hardwood floors reflected the glow of the Christmas lights, but all I could see was the second mortgage I had taken on my own house to pay for them. The crown molding, the silk curtains, the marble coffee table, even the very sofa where Ethan sat with his shoulders hunched, all of it had passed through my hands before it ever entered his. Sophie's heels clicked against the floor as she approached, her chin tilted with the same precision as her words. "We need an atmosphere of elegance tonight," she said, her voice smooth but sharp. "You do not fit, Linda. I am sorry, but this evening is not for you." She wasn't sorry. The way her eyes swept over me, like I was dust in her carefully arranged home, told the truth. Margaret Caldwell, her mother, leaned back on the sofa, glass of wine in hand, lips curled into a smile designed to cut. "Well, at least she understands when she isn't wanted. That's something, isn't it?" She laughed softly, directing her words to her husband, but making sure they hit me like stones. Richard smirked, adjusting his cufflinks, saying nothing, but his silence was louder than any insult. He didn't need to add words. His expression screamed triumph, as though casting me out was another victory for his family's pride. And Ethan, my son. He lowered his gaze, eyes glued to the carpet I had chosen with him last year, when he insisted Sophie wanted something modern and refined. His lips parted as if he might speak, as if he might defend me. Instead, his shoulders sagged, and his head bowed. He said nothing. His silence screamed betrayal. The air was thick. Every breath I took felt stolen, every heartbeat louder than the last. I could have argued. I could have reminded them of the years of mortgage payments, of the trust fund transfers, of every bill and every loan I had covered so that Ethan could stand here, surrounded by things he hadn't earned. But I didn't. My pride rose higher than their contempt. I let the corner of my mouth curl into a thin, deliberate smile. "Then I will not disturb you," I said quietly, every syllable carrying steel. "I wish you all a perfect Christmas." For a moment, no one moved. Sophie blinked, as though surprised I hadn't begged. Margaret's smile faltered, and Richard shifted in his seat. Ethan's chest rose sharply, but he still didn't speak. I turned. My coat hung by the door, tucked beneath Sophie's collection of designer jackets, each one more expensive than the last. I pulled mine free, the sleeve catching on hers for a moment, tearing a thread loose. The sound was small, but it echoed in my mind like a warning. Fabric fraying, masks unraveling. As I reached for the door, Sophie's voice followed, clipped and controlled. "Thank you for understanding." I didn't answer. I placed my hand on the cold metal handle, pulled the door open, and stepped into the night. The blast of December air hit me full in the face, crisp and merciless. Behind me, the warmth of the house and the muted chatter resumed. But I didn't turn back. Every step down that walkway felt like walking across the wreckage of my own trust. The holiday lights from neighboring houses twinkled in cheerful patterns, but for me, they burned like cruel reminders of everything I had been denied. My son sat in a home I had built, with people who treated me like an intruder, and he chose silence. I reached my car, the dish of honey-roasted chicken still in my arms, and set it carefully on the passenger seat. The smell filled the small space, mocking the emptiness I felt. I sat behind the wheel, hands gripping the steering column, my pulse pounding with fury disguised as calm. Through the windshield, the glow of their Christmas tree shone from the front window. I watched for one moment longer, the silhouettes inside moving about as if I had never existed. Then I started the engine, the hum of the motor rising like a vow in my chest. As I pulled away from the curb, my breath steadied. I realized then that what had just happened was not an ending. It was a beginning. They thought they had shut me out, stripped me of dignity, and left me powerless. They believed my silence meant defeat. They had no idea that silence could also mean strategy. I whispered to myself, voice low but unwavering, "So be it. Let them have their perfect Christmas. I will have the truth." Snowflakes streaked across the windshield as I drove into the dark streets of Spokane. For the first time in years, I felt no obligation to explain, no urge to justify. My son's silence, Sophie's arrogance, Margaret's mockery, Richard's smug disdain, they had given me something far more valuable than their acceptance. They had given me clarity, and clarity, once found, cannot be returned. I drove through the streets of Spokane with the silence of rejection pressing against me. Holiday lights blinked on every corner, throwing their reflections across my windshield, colors bleeding into one another as though the entire city mocked me with its cheer. My hands gripped the steering wheel, steady and cold, but my eyes burned. Each passing house seemed to hold a family gathered close, laughter spilling out into the night, while I carried the weight of being told by my own son that I did not belong. The snow fell heavier as I turned toward my neighborhood. The wipers swept the flakes aside, clearing my view for seconds at a time, but nothing could clear the storm in my chest. I had given Ethan everything. Every decision I made after Mark's death had been about securing his future. Now he sat in the comfort of a house built by my sacrifice, siding with people who despised me. That truth no longer pierced like a blade. It hammered like iron, reshaping me with every thought. When I pulled into my driveway, the porch light flickered weakly, reminding me of all the repairs I had postponed. I had chosen to ignore the cracks in my own home so I could fund marble countertops, hardwood floors, and imported curtains for Ethan and Sophie. That stopped tonight. I killed the engine, stepped out, and listened to the crunch of snow beneath my boots as I walked to the door. The cold bit into my cheeks, but I welcomed it. It was sharper, but more honest than the smiles I had left behind. Inside, the air was still. The house smelled faintly of old wood and cinnamon from the candle I had burned the night before. I set my coat aside, stoked the fire, and watched flames climb hungrily up the logs. The heat brushed my face, but it did nothing to thaw the resolve that had begun to harden in me. I walked to the cabinet where I kept a locked box. From it, I pulled a thick folder and carried it to the low table in front of the fire. The folder thudded as it landed, papers spilling slightly from the edges. I spread them out one by one. Bank statements, trust fund transfers, contracts signed in ink. I still remembered Ethan holding the pen too, and countless text messages from Sophie, each one laced with urgency and entitlement. "Linda, could you cover the utilities until Ethan's next check clears? We're a little short this month. Can you transfer extra? It's important for appearances. You understand, right?" The words blurred together, not from tears, but from the sheer repetition. Demands dressed as requests, always assuming my answer would be yes. I picked up one particular document, the authorization I had signed years ago that allowed automatic transfers from my account directly to cover their mortgage. Every month, like clockwork, nearly $3,000 drained away. For 5 years, I had carried that weight. I stared at the numbers, the dates, the balance shrinking, and for the first time I felt no guilt about what I was about to do. I spoke aloud, my voice cutting through the room. "Enough!" The word rang against the walls, sharper than any plea I had ever whispered in private. I picked up my phone, scrolling through contacts until I reached the number for my bank. I pressed call. The ring was short, and soon a calm female voice answered. "Customer service, this is Dana. How can I help you today? I need to terminate an automatic transfer, I said. My tone was steady, almost too calm, as though I had rehearsed this moment in silence for years. Of course. May I have your account number and the details of the transfer? I read the numbers directly from the paper. It's a monthly transfer, $2,800, scheduled on the 15th, to Wells Fargo, account ending in 7423. I heard her typing in the background, keys clicking briskly. I see the record. This transfer has been in place for some time. 5 years, I replied. Terminated immediately. She paused. Do you want this canceled starting next cycle or effective right now? Effective now. I didn't hesitate. Understood, she said. I will process this as permanent termination. The funds will no longer be withdrawn. Good, I answered. My voice held a finality that surprised even me. Is there anything else I can assist you with today? No, that is all. I ended the call, set the phone beside the papers, and leaned back into the chair. The fire crackled, casting shadows across the documents scattered before me. It felt as though I had just cut a chain I had been dragging for half a decade. My chest rose with a breath that reached deeper than any in recent memory. The snow outside pressed against the window, soft but relentless, like time itself. I stared at the flames and realized something fundamental had shifted. They thought I was a victim, a bank account, a woman too desperate for her son's approval to ever resist. They were wrong. Tonight, I had chosen a different path. I gathered the papers back into the folder, sliding each one carefully into place. Not out of sentiment, but preparation. These were no longer reminders of sacrifice. They were evidence. Evidence of years I had carried their lives while they mocked mine. Evidence I might one day need. The fire roared louder as I added another log. My reflection in the window stared back at me, framed by the glow of flames and the cold night beyond. The woman I saw was not broken. She was sharpened. She was finished with silence. I lifted my glass of water, took a long drink, and set it down with purpose. The decision was made. The money would no longer flow. Let them feel the cold for once. That night, I did not sleep with regret. I slept with resolve. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm I had just unleashed. The first call came early in the morning. My phone buzzed on the table while I poured hot water into my cup. I glanced at the screen. Ethan. I let it ring until it stopped. I stirred the tea slowly, the steam curling upward, warm against my face. The second call came before I had taken a sip. Sophie. I placed the cup down, picked up a book, and let her name vanish from the screen. By noon, the calls stacked one after another. Ethan again. A number I did not recognize. Then, Sophie. Another number, another attempt. The phone rattled across the wooden surface, its vibrations like frantic knocks from a world I no longer belonged to. I folded my arms, leaned back into the chair by the window, and watched the snow fall. Outside, Spokane lay under a heavy white sheet. Cars moved slowly down the slush-covered streets. Children in bright coats hurled snowballs at one another, their laughter faint but clear. The world looked calm. Inside my house, the only storm existed in my phone, buzzing relentlessly. By evening of the first day, there were 9 missed calls. By the second day, the number doubled. On the third day, the screen showed 27 unanswered cries. Ethan's voice filled the voicemail box, breaking apart in desperation. "Mom, pick up. Please, we need to talk. Just call me back." Sophie's messages came sharp, brittle. "This is serious, Linda. You can't ignore us. You don't understand what's happening." But I did understand. Their lifeline had been cut, and they were drowning. I sat near the fireplace with my tea, listening not to their pleas but to the hiss of the fire and the howl of the wind outside. Every vibration of the phone reminded me of the years I had answered every call, every request, every fabricated emergency. This time, silence was my answer. While I chose stillness, I knew chaos erupted elsewhere. In Richard Caldwell's office, far across town, the polished mahogany desk shook under the weight of his fist. "She cut the payments? Now? Of all times?" His face turned red. veins standing out as he paced the room. The leather chair sat untouched. He was too furious to sit. "Do you understand what this means?" he shouted at Margaret, who sat with crossed arms, lips pressed into a thin line. "She will crawl back," Margaret said with disdain, though her voice trembled. "She has always crawled back." Richard leaned across the desk, voice low and venomous. "Not this time. She is trying to make a statement. She thinks she can humiliate us." He jabbed a finger into the air. "No one humiliates me, not in this city." Back at the house, Sophie sat on the edge of the bed, mascara streaked down her cheeks. She pressed the phone to her ear, whispering between sobs. "She's not answering. She won't answer." Ethan paced the room, his tie loosened, shirt wrinkled. His voice cracked under the pressure. "Maybe she's just upset. Maybe she needs time. She'll call." Sophie snapped her head up, her tears turning to anger. "Time? We don't have time. The mortgage is due. The bank will be calling next. My father's name is tied to this. Do you have any idea what's at stake?" Ethan stopped pacing, his shoulders collapsing under invisible weight. "I'll go see her tomorrow. I'll make her listen." Sophie shook her head, gripping the phone tighter. "You should have stopped her before it got to this. You should have told her what it would mean." Ethan closed his eyes, whispering as if to himself, "I didn't think she'd ever say no." While they drowned in panic, I lifted my cup again, savoring the quiet. The taste of the tea was richer than usual, or perhaps I was only now able to notice it. Each sip was a small victory, each unanswered call a declaration that the balance had shifted. The snow continued to fall through the night. My phone buzzed again, flashing Ethan's name across the screen, the 28th attempt. I turned it face down and set it aside. For once, I was not the one trembling. For once, it was them. That silence, my silence, spoke louder than any words I could have given. And it was only the beginning. The morning arrived gray and sharp, the kind of winter light that feels more like steel than sunshine. I walked down my driveway to collect the paper, expecting the usual headlines about politics or weather. Instead, my heart clenched the moment I saw my own face staring back at me from the front page of the Seattle Review. The headline screamed in bold letters, "Wealthy Widow Abandons In-Laws on a Winter Night." Beneath it was a photo I recognized all too well, an old image from a community fundraiser years ago, my smile mid-motion, eyes caught in a strange angle. But they had tampered with it. The picture was cropped tightly, shadows enhanced until my expression looked unhinged, almost manic. And then I saw the quote beneath the photograph, a dagger sharpened by Richard Caldwell himself. "We are deeply concerned for Linda Parker's mental health. No family should suffer this kind of instability during the holidays." The words burned hotter than fire. He hadn't just twisted the story. He had dragged my sanity into question, all to paint me as the villain who had turned her back on family in their hour of need. I could almost hear his voice, smug and deliberate, as he fed that poison to the press. I stood frozen for a long moment, the cold air biting my hands as the paper rattled in the wind. Then I carried it inside, laid it flat on my kitchen table, and read every word. Each sentence was more vicious than the last, crafted carefully to make me look reckless, selfish, unstable. Sophie was portrayed as the innocent daughter-in-law abandoned by her husband's difficult mother. Margaret was quoted as saying, "We tried to welcome her, but sometimes pride blinds a person to what truly matters." I felt the rage climb up my spine, steady and hot. My tea on the stove whistled, but I didn't move to pour it. Instead, I picked up the scissors from the counter. With careful precision, I cut the article clean from the paper, trimmed its edges, and slid it into a folder already thick with documents. Bank statements, contracts, transfers, pleas for money. And now, this. I pressed the folder closed with my palm, my voice steady in the empty room. "So, you chose war." In that moment, everything became clear. Richard had moved the battle from whispers and family arguments into the public eye. He wanted me humiliated, painted as an unstable widow who could not be trusted with her fortune. He wanted the city to side with him, to see me as a liability rather than a benefactor. It was a tactic as old as greed itself. If you cannot steal quietly, then destroy loudly. But he had miscalculated. I brewed the tea at last, sat down by the window, and let the article rest in front of me. Snow fell outside, thick flakes piling against the glass. My phone lay silent on the table. After 27 ignored calls, even Ethan and Sophie had gone quiet. That quiet told me everything I needed to know. They were regrouping, and Richard had made his opening move by striking first in public. The more I read his words, the more absurd they became. Instability, mental health concerns, family suffering. Did they forget how many years I had kept them afloat, writing check after check, covering debts they created? Did they think no one would question why a supposedly unstable widow had been their silent lifeline for so long? I imagined Richard standing in his office, dictating the quotes, sipping his scotch while Margaret nodded approvingly. Sophie would be wringing her hands, tears ready at the corners of her eyes for the sympathy she would perform. And Ethan, my son, would probably sit quietly, saying nothing, the same silence he offered me the night he let them cast me out. I clenched my fist, but not in despair. No, my anger was no longer wild. It was focused. I spoke again, firmer now, my words cutting through the crackle of the fireplace. You wanted a fight in public? Then the public will see the truth. I took out a pen and wrote notes directly on the margins of the article. Dates, amounts, the year Ethan and Sophie begged me for a down payment, the exact figure of the monthly mortgage I had carried for 5 years, the loan Margaret requested under the guise of a short-term favor. Line by line, I annotated their lies with cold, hard facts. I wasn't shaken by their attempt to smear me. I was sharpened by it. By evening, I placed the folder back in its drawer, the scissors on top, ready for the next clipping. The snow outside had thickened into a storm, and the wind howled like a warning. I stood at the window, arms crossed, watching the flakes swirl against the glass. "They think I'm fragile," I whispered. "They think silence means weakness. But silence is strategy." I turned off the lights one by one, leaving the fire to burn low. As I climbed the stairs, the words of the article echoed in my head. But this time, they didn't wound me. They fueled me. Richard wanted war in the press. I would give him something stronger. Truth, revealed at the right time, with the precision of a blade. And when that time came, his own words would be the rope that dragged him down. I still hear his voice when the house is quiet, steady, and calm, even though he has been gone for years. Mark sat beside me in that hospital room, his hand trembling but firm as it wrapped around mine. His eyes, tired but full of clarity, searched my face. "Linda," he whispered, "don't let anyone take advantage of you. Promise me. Protect what we built. Don't give away your strength to anyone, not even for Ethan. Promise me that." I promised. I held on to those words like armor after his funeral, repeating them whenever doubt clouded my mind. But promises can be broken not by weakness alone, but by love twisted in the wrong hands. The night after the article smeared me across the city, I opened my folder again. The fire burned low, casting shadows across the room. I pulled out document after document, my pen marks scrawled across the margins, notes circling every lie the Caldwells had spun. But then, tucked beneath the stack, I found a file I had not looked at in months. It was an authorization contract, heavy with legal language, the kind I usually reviewed twice before signing. My name was there, of course, but what struck me cold was not my signature. It was Ethan's. His handwriting, his full name, signed neatly beneath a line that read, "Authorization for transfer of financial control to Richard Caldwell." I stared at it, refusing to believe what I saw. My son's name, inked in black, giving authority to the man who despised me. My own flesh and blood had placed my fortune in the hands of a vulture. I whispered to myself, no, he wouldn't. Not Ethan. But the paper didn't lie. The date was clear, only 6 months ago. Around that time, Ethan had come to me with unusual kindness, insisting I didn't need to worry about the complicated transactions anymore, that he had everything under control. I had wanted to believe him. I had let love blind me. I set the paper down, my breath sharp and uneven. Mark's voice returned, louder now, echoing like a verdict. "Don't let anyone take advantage of you. Protect what we built." I pressed my palms into the table, anger rising fast and hot. The Caldwells weren't just leeching from me. Ethan had opened the door for them. My son, the boy I had raised with every ounce of my heart, had chosen to stand with them rather than with me. I flipped through other files, searching for answers. Bank statements confirmed it. Transfers that had Richard's name attached, not just Sophie's. Adjustments made without my review, hidden under the guise of efficiency. And Ethan's initials marked beside each one. He hadn't simply been silent. He had been complicit. The betrayal cut deeper than any insult Sophie or Margaret had ever hurled. Their cruelty I expected. Their disdain had always been naked and sharp. But Ethan's betrayal was different. It was quiet. It was dressed as care, and that made it unforgivable. I rose from my chair and paced the room, fists clenched, voice steady, but hard. "So this is how you repay me. You sign away my trust to the man who mocks me. You let them strip me clean, and you stand there pretending you had no choice." Images rushed through my mind. Ethan as a boy, running through the yard, his hand in mine on his first day of school, his nervous smile at graduation. Every memory tangled now with the cold fact that he had sold me out. I stopped at the fireplace, staring into the flames. For a moment, I considered burning the document, reducing the betrayal to ash. But then I laughed, low and bitter. No, not yet. Evidence is more powerful than fire. I slipped the contract back into the folder, pressing it flat between the other papers. My hands shook, but my resolve had never been steadier. Richard thought his public smear campaign would destroy me. Margaret thought her barbed comments would silence me. Sophie thought her crocodile tears would shield her from accountability. And Ethan, my son, thought I would forgive endlessly, that I would remain the quiet mother who always said yes. They were all wrong. The truth sat in my hands, undeniable, damning. Ethan's signature would speak louder than any accusation I could ever make, and when the time came, I would let the world see it. I sat back down, my voice firm, as though Mark himself were listening. "You told me to protect what we built. I failed for a time, but no longer. This ends now." The snow outside thickened into heavy sheets, blanketing the world in white silence. But inside, I felt no silence. I felt the crack of chains breaking, the weight lifting from my chest. They thought they had cornered me, reduced me to a victim. Instead, they had revealed their own betrayal. And betrayal has a cost. The night stretched long, but I didn't feel tired. My house was quiet. Only the steady hum of the heater and the occasional crackle from the fireplace filled the silence. On the table before me, stacks of documents lay scattered, each one a piece of truth I had collected carefully over the years. Bank statements with my account numbers highlighted. Mortgage payments withdrawn like clockwork, month after month, directly covering Ethan and Sophie's perfect house. Credit card bills Sophie had run up, followed by texts dripping with entitlement. "Linda, could you just cover this one too? We'll pay you back soon." But soon never came. And then the newspaper clipping, Richard's smug words still fresh in black ink. I circled every lie in red, my handwriting slicing through the page like a blade. Beside his quote about my instability, I wrote the exact figures of the checks I had written to his family, checks that had kept his reputation intact when his own investments went sour. I worked with precision, methodical, as though preparing evidence for a trial. In a way, that's exactly what it was. I pulled out 20 manila envelopes and began dividing the documents into sets. Each envelope received copies of the bank statements, the bills, the text messages, and the article marked with my notes. I wanted no one to doubt. I wanted no one to walk away confused. Every guest at the Caldwells' next grand gathering would hold undeniable proof in their hands. As I slipped the last clipping inside, I paused. My reflection stared back at me in the darkened window. My face looked calm, almost cold, but my eyes burned with determination. "The truth doesn't need to scream," I whispered. "It only needs to be seen." I sealed the envelopes one by one, pressing each flap closed with deliberate care. 20 neat packages lined up on the table like soldiers waiting to march. The firelight glinted against the golden edges of the manila paper, casting long shadows across the room. I stacked them into a box and tied it shut with twine. My hands didn't shake. They hadn't trembled once since I found Ethan's signature on that contract. Pain had turned to fury, and fury had crystallized into resolve. There was no going back. I imagined the looks on their faces when the truth dropped into their polished hands. Richard, red with rage but powerless to dismiss cold evidence. Margaret, her practiced smile cracking as the numbers stripped away her superiority. Sophie, her crocodile tears drying when confronted with her own begging texts. And Ethan, my son, who would see his own betrayal laid bare for everyone to witness. I thought of Mark again, his final warning. "Protect what we built." My voice firmed as if answering him directly. "I will, even if it means breaking my own heart to do it." I placed the box by the door, ready for delivery. Snow beat against the windows, tapping in steady rhythm like a clock ticking down to the moment of reckoning. The Caldwells believed they had cornered me with their lies in the press. They believed their money and influence could buy silence and bend the truth to their will. But what they never understood was that I had been documenting everything, quietly, patiently, waiting for the day they would overstep. That day had come. I poured myself a final cup of tea, the steam rising in front of me like smoke from a battlefield. My heart was steady, my breathing even. I wasn't afraid of their power anymore. Their weapons were deception and influence. Mine was truth, sharpened and undeniable. As midnight drew near, I extinguished the fire and walked upstairs. The house was still, blanketed in silence, but I felt no loneliness. For the first time in years, I felt in control. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, rehearsing in my mind the steps to come, the delivery, the reactions, the fallout. Every piece had been prepared. Every detail was ready. I closed my eyes, a final thought escaping my lips before sleep claimed me. "You wanted a war, Richard. Now you'll have one, and I will not lose." The Caldwell estate glowed against the night sky, every window blazing with golden light. Cars lined the circular driveway, their polished exteriors reflecting the massive wreaths hung from the front columns. From outside, I could already hear the laughter, the clinking of crystal, the practiced joy of Spokane's elite gathering under one roof. I parked my modest sedan a few blocks away, choosing the walk over valet service. Snow crunched beneath my boots, crisp air filling my lungs with each step. The black dress I wore was simple, unadorned, yet deliberate. No sequins, no diamonds, no attempt to match their grandeur. My power tonight was not in decoration. It was in truth. The moment I pushed open the grand doors, silence rippled through the room. Dozens of heads turned toward me, eyes widening. Whispers fluttered like startled birds. No one had expected me to show my face here, least of all after Richard's smear campaign in the press. But there I was, standing tall under the chandelier, the box of envelopes in my hand. Sophie's complexion drained instantly, her champagne flute trembling before she set it down too quickly. Margaret leaned toward her with a smirk that couldn't quite mask unease, her words slipping like venom. Of course she couldn't stay away. Richard froze mid-conversation with a city councilman, his jaw tightening, the lines around his mouth sharpening with fury. And Ethan, my son, looked as though the floor had vanished beneath him. His face flushed, his eyes darted between me and his in-laws, torn between shame and panic. He opened his mouth, but no words came. I didn't speak either. I didn't need to. I crossed the marble floor, each step deliberate, the sound of my heels echoing louder than their whispers. I carried the weight of my folder with ease, set it on the long mahogany dining table in the center of the room, and slid it forward. The box landed with a soft thud, commanding more attention than any toast could. The room stilled. Crystal glasses were lowered. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Every guest's gaze fixed on me. Without introduction, without preamble, I opened the box and drew out the envelopes. One by one, I placed them on the table. 20 in total, arranged like cards in a dealer's hand. I lifted my head, my voice firm but not raised. "These are for you," I said, eyes sweeping across the crowd. "Read them. You'll find them enlightening." Richard stepped forward, his voice sharp, strained with barely contained rage. "This is not your place, Linda. You have no right." I cut him off, my tone steady as stone. "You made it public. You dragged my name into headlines and questioned my sanity. Tonight, I return the favor, with facts, not whispers." Gasps rippled through the guests. I handed the first envelope directly to a local judge, the second to a banker, the third to a woman whose husband I recognized from the city's Chamber of Commerce. My fingers didn't falter. Each person who accepted the envelope glanced inside, their brows knitting, eyes widening as they saw the truth laid bare. Bank statements, transfers, Sophie's pleading texts, Richard's debts covered quietly by my hand. Margaret hissed under her breath, "This is beneath you." I looked her directly in the eyes. "No, this is exactly where it belongs. In the hands of those you've been fooling for years." Sophie tugged at Ethan's sleeve, whispering frantically, "Do something. Stop her." But Ethan stood frozen, lips pressed tight, unable to move. His silence was louder than any protest. I continued handing out the envelopes until all 20 had been distributed. The guests whispered among themselves, paper rustling as they flipped through the evidence. One woman covered her mouth in shock. A man muttered to his neighbor, "She paid for all of it, every last cent." Richard's face flushed crimson. He slammed his palm against the table. "This is manipulation. You're twisting details to make yourself look like a martyr." I turned back to him, my eyes unwavering. "Numbers don't twist themselves. Neither do signatures. Look closely, Richard. You'll see your name, your debts, your desperation written in ink. And Ethan's name, too, granting you authority over funds that were never yours." Ethan's head dropped as the words landed. His shame filled the silence he refused to break. I stepped back from the table, my voice calm, cutting through the heavy air. "I am not here to scream or to beg. I am here to remind you, and everyone in this room, that truth does not need to raise its voice. It only needs to be seen." No one moved. The music had stopped long ago. The grandeur of the party dissolved, leaving only the weight of the evidence in trembling hands. I gathered my coat from the chair near the entrance, my movements measured, my chin lifted. Before stepping out into the snowy night, I paused, turning one last time. "To those who believed the headlines, you now have the full story. Do with it what you will." Then I left, the door closing behind me with finality. Outside, the cold air struck my face, clean and sharp. I walked down the long driveway, the muffled sounds of panic and murmurs spilling faintly from behind the estate's glowing windows. Each step I took into the snow was lighter than the last. For years I had been the silent benefactor, the invisible backbone of their so-called perfect life. Tonight, I became something else. Not their victim, not their scapegoat, but the woman who turned their own stage into mine. And I knew as the snow crunched beneath my boots, this was only the beginning. The rustle of paper filled the grand hall as one envelope after another was opened. Crystal glasses remained untouched, and the hum of small talk had vanished. All that existed now was the sound of pages turning and the weight of realization sinking into the faces of Spokane's finest. Inside each envelope lay the evidence of 7 years, bank transfers, mortgage payments, canceled checks, Sophie's text messages, and the article Richard had orchestrated with his false concern. My notes in red ink sliced across the newsprint like wounds reopening. A man near the front, a local banker, muttered under his breath, yet loud enough to carry, "The entire house, paid for with her money?" His words landed in the silence like a hammer. Heads turned toward Ethan and Sophie, their expressions a mix of disbelief and disgust. A woman with pearls around her neck whispered, clutching the papers as though they burned, "Every party, every trip, every debt, all of it covered by her." I stepped forward, my voice steady. "You read the headlines, but headlines only tell half the story, and half a truth is the most perfect lie." I laid the newspaper clipping flat on the polished table for all to see, my handwriting circling Richard's words: instability, suffering, mental health concerns. Beneath it, in bold red ink, I had written, "While taking her money, month after month." Richard's composure cracked, his face flushed crimson, and his voice thundered, shaking the glasses on the table. "You dare stand here and destroy the Caldwell name in front of our guests? This is slander. You are poisoning decent people with your bitterness." I met his fury with calm. "No, Richard, this is not slander. These are records. Numbers don't bend to your pride. My silence funded your parties. My sacrifice covered your debts. I didn't abandon you. I simply stopped feeding people who mistook themselves for royalty." Margaret shot up from her chair, her face pale but her voice sharp. "You ungrateful woman. We offered you respect, our family's protection, and this is how you repay us? By dragging us through the mud?" I turned my gaze on her, unflinching. Respect is not built on handouts disguised as charity. Protection is not stealing behind contracts signed in my son's hand. You built a kingdom of glass and assumed it would never shatter. Tonight, it cracks. Sophie's tears came, as they always did, but this time they did not fall onto sympathetic shoulders. She clutched Ethan's arm, whispering fiercely, "Say something. Defend us." But Ethan remained frozen, his mouth opening and closing without sound. His silence condemned him more than my evidence ever could. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but not one left. The truth held them captive. They stared at the documents as though staring into a mirror of deceit, forced to acknowledge the foundation beneath the Caldwell name had been bought by me, piece by piece. Richard slammed his fist against the table, the sound reverberating through the hall. "You've ruined everything. You've made us look like beggars." I allowed a pause, my words sharp as ice. "I didn't make you look like beggars. You chose to act like beggars. I merely stopped disguising it." Gasps erupted, some muffled laughter breaking from corners of the room, quickly silenced by the intensity of the moment. For the first time, the power shifted tangibly in the air. Richard no longer commanded the room. I did. I picked up another copy of the article, holding it high for all to see. "They called me unstable. They said I abandoned family. Look again. These are their requests, their debts, their signatures. This," I tossed the clipping back onto the table, "is not family. It is exploitation, and I will not be part of it any longer." The guests looked from me to the Caldwells, weighing the truth in their hands against the lies they had been fed. Murmurs spread, louder this time, no longer whispers, but conversations. Unbelievable. She carried them for years. "And they turned her into the villain?" Margaret's face tightened, her voice rising into a shrill pitch. "She is twisting everything. She's bitter because she's alone. Don't let her fool you." I stepped closer, leaning into her words with precision. "Alone is better than surrounded by leeches. And bitter?" My eyes swept over Sophie, then Richard. "Bitterness is when you depend on someone's lifeline, then spit on the hand that fed you." The silence afterward was suffocating, broken only by the soft crackle of the fireplace. Richard's hands trembled as he pointed at me, his voice nearly breaking. "You've humiliated us. You've ruined the Caldwell name." I took a step back, letting my words slice clean. "No, Richard, you ruined it yourself. All I did was stop paying for the illusion." The truth was now in their hands, undeniable and permanent. They could deny me, insult me, even smear me in the papers again. But the room no longer belonged to them. It belonged to the evidence, to the numbers, to the unshakable reality of what I had carried alone for 7 years. I straightened my shoulders, the tension in my chest dissolving. I don't need to scream. I don't need to beg. I have the truth, and the truth is enough. The chandeliers glowed above me. The polished marble reflected the shock etched on every face. And in that moment, I knew the war had shifted. The Caldwells thought they had silenced me. Tonight, I reminded them, and everyone watching, that silence can also be a weapon. And for the first time in years, I walked out of that room carrying nothing but myself, leaving them with the weight of their own lies. Richard's chair screeched against the marble floor as he shot up, his face flushed with fury. He slammed his fist on the table, making the silverware rattle. "Enough of this circus. You don't belong here. Long. Get out before I have you thrown out." His voice roared across the hall, sharp enough to cut through the thick silence. I didn't flinch. I stood firm, the envelopes now spread across the guests' laps like weapons of truth. For every insult Richard hurled, the papers shouted louder. One man in the back, a council member I recognized from past fundraisers, raised his hand. His voice carried authority. "Richard, sit down. We want to hear everything. Every word." A ripple of agreement followed, murmurs of "let her speak" weaving through the crowd. The air shifted. Richard, once the unquestioned master of this house, was now outnumbered in his own domain. Margaret's voice cut through the chorus, shrill with panic. She shot from her seat, her necklace swinging wildly against her chest. "She's twisting you all with her sob story. Do not let this woman fool you. She is nothing but a widow who got lucky, married into money, and now pretends she built it herself." Gasps erupted from the guests. Someone muttered, "Shameless," under their breath. I turned slowly to Margaret, letting her venom fill the room before I spoke. My words dropped like stones into water, deliberate and calm. Luck didn't rebuild the company after Mark died. Luck didn't take night shifts and keep payroll running when creditors came knocking. That was me. Every dollar that went into this house passed through my hands first. Richard's jaw tightened, but I didn't give him space to interrupt. Instead, I pivoted toward Ethan, who had been shrinking into his chair, his hands trembling over the untouched wine glass. My voice sharpened, louder now, every syllable aimed straight at him. "Ethan, tell them the truth. You signed the document. You handed Richard power over the trust. You gave him authority over the money your father and I built for you. Do you dare deny it?" Every head turned to him. Sophie clutched his arm, whispering fiercely, "Say something. For God's sake, say something." But Ethan couldn't. His lips parted, then closed again. His face blanched, his eyes darting from me to Richard, to the stack of evidence in front of him. His silence spoke louder than any confession. The guests leaned forward, eyes wide, their disbelief morphing into outrage. One woman shook her head in disgust. "You betrayed your own mother." Another man whispered, "Signed her future away." The fury in the room was no longer aimed at me. It had turned squarely on Ethan and the Caldwells. Richard barked, desperate now. "It was a formality. She agreed. She trusted us." I cut him off, my voice rising above his. "Trusted you? Trust doesn't require signatures behind closed doors. Trust doesn't come with hidden clauses and stolen authority. Trust is earned, Richard, and you, all of you, shattered it." Margaret tried to recover, her voice trembling but still vicious. "This woman is hysterical. Look at her. She's unraveling before your eyes." I leaned across the table, my eyes locked on hers. "No, Margaret. What you're seeing is control. You mistake silence for weakness. Tonight, I show you what strength looks like when it finally stops carrying leeches on its back." The room erupted again, not in chaos, but in applause. A slow, deliberate clapping from the council member who had first spoken, joined by others who now stood in quiet defiance against the Caldwells. The sound reverberated off the chandelier, echoing like a verdict. Ethan sank deeper into his chair, his head bowed, shame washing over him. Sophie's eyes darted frantically, searching for sympathy, but none came. Richard's hands shook as he gripped the table's edge, his empire collapsing around him, not from my hand alone, but from the weight of the truth pressing in from every side. I stood taller, my voice final, my words cutting through the tension like glass breaking. I didn't come here to beg for a seat at your table. I came to remind you that without me, this table wouldn't even exist. You may call me a widow, you may call me bitter, but tonight— I paused, letting my gaze sweep across every stunned guest. You will call me the one who stopped pretending you were anything more than parasites, feeding off my blood. No one spoke after that. Even Richard, trembling with rage, had no words left to throw. Ethan remained silent, condemned by the truth he couldn't deny. The chandeliers glowed brighter somehow, their light reflecting the collapse of an empire that had mocked me for years. And for the first time they weren't laughing. They were cornered. And everyone in that room knew it. The Caldwells could not accept humiliation in their own dining room. Within days, Richard wielded his influence like a weapon. His lawyers filed suit against me, accusing me of causing reputational damage and financial harm. Newspapers ran with the story, fueled by the same connections that had once printed his lies about me. Wealthy widow destabilizes family empire. Sources question her mental health after dramatic confrontation. Headlines spread across Spokane and Seattle, my face plastered beside words meant to make me look fragile, unstable, hysterical. But I wasn't fragile, and I wasn't hysterical. I was steady. I was ready. Every morning I clipped the articles, folded them with precision, and slipped them into my growing file. They thought each smear weakened me. Instead, each lie became more proof of their corruption. By the time the hearing date was set, the courthouse had become the center of attention. Local news crews lined the steps, cameras flashing as polished cars dropped off lawyers in tailored suits. The Caldwells arrived flanked by reporters, Margaret's chin high, Richard's arm firm around Sophie, and Ethan trailing behind, pale and unsteady. I walked alone, my black coat buttoned to the collar, my bag tucked neatly under my arm. No entourage, no pretense, just me. The murmurs rose as I passed, microphones shoved toward me, questions barked. Mrs. Parker, are you afraid of losing everything? Did you orchestrate this confrontation for attention? I didn't answer. My silence was deliberate, the same silence that had rattled them when I ignored 27 phone calls. Silence carried weight. It made them speak louder, reveal more. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Spectators filled every bench. The air buzzed with curiosity, as if this were less a legal proceeding and more a theater of downfall. Reporters scribbled, cameras clicked, and at the front, Richard sat like a king reclaiming his throne. When I entered, his lips curved into a smirk. Margaret leaned toward Sophie, whispering something that made her daughter-in-law nod smugly. Ethan couldn't meet my eyes. The judge entered, the gavel struck, and the trial began. Richard's attorney stood first, polished and eloquent. He painted me as an aging widow who had misinterpreted acts of kindness as exploitation. He described my Christmas appearance as an unhinged intrusion fueled by bitterness. He waved the newspaper article as evidence, his voice carrying across the silent courtroom. This, he declared, is not the act of a rational woman. It is the act of someone unraveling. Gasps rippled. The press scribbled furiously. Margaret dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief, as if the words wounded her delicate soul. I listened, calm, hands folded on the table. When they finished, my attorney didn't rise immediately. He let the silence stretch, forcing the weight of their accusations to linger, to suffocate. Then he stood, opened our folder, and walked to the center with deliberate steps. He didn't shout. He didn't posture. He laid the first exhibit on the stand, a bank transfer slip, dated, signed, irrefutable. Then another, then another. Month after month, year after year, a trail of my money sustaining the very people calling me unstable. He read Sophie's text aloud, his voice clear. "Linda, we're short again. Could you cover the mortgage this month, just until Ethan gets back on track?" The courtroom murmured. Sophie's face flushed crimson. Margaret clutched her pearls tighter. Then he held up the contract. Ethan's signature sprawled across the bottom, granting Richard full control of funds that weren't his to touch. The judge leaned forward, eyebrows rising. "Mr. Parker," the judge asked, his tone heavy, "did you sign this document?" Ethan's voice cracked. I did." The room erupted, whispers colliding like waves. Reporters' pens scratched furiously, the sound like fire consuming paper. Richard slammed his hand against the table, shouting objections, but the judge's gavel silenced him. And then it was my turn. I rose slowly, every movement deliberate. My voice, steady but sharp, filled the room. "They call me unstable. They call me bitter. Yet for 7 years, I paid their bills, funded their luxuries, saved their house. These documents are not fantasies. They are reality. The only instability here is the kind created by greed, lies, and betrayal." I lifted the newspaper clipping Richard had planted. "This is half a truth. Half a truth is the perfect lie. They told the world I abandoned family. But family does not abandon you first. Family does not sell your trust to the highest bidder." The spectators leaned in, hanging on each word. Some nodded. Some murmured in agreement. I felt the tide shift, not with dramatic flair, but with the quiet certainty of truth carving through lies. The Caldwells fidgeted, their polished image unraveling under the weight of evidence. Margaret hissed at Sophie. Richard's face turned a dangerous shade of red. Ethan sat in silence, shame etched into every line of his posture. When I finished, I returned to my seat. The judge's eyes lingered on me, then moved to the stack of documents, then back to Richard. "This court," he said, his voice ringing, "will consider the evidence carefully. But what I see tonight is not hysteria. What I see is proof." The gavel struck again, adjournment echoing like a verdict yet to come. As I walked out, flashes exploded from cameras, reporters shouting louder than before. But I didn't need to answer them. My steps were calm, my chin lifted, because the truth was already louder than any lie they could print. The courtroom smelled of oak polish and paper, but to me it felt like a theater, a stage set for truth to finally speak. I sat at the plaintiff's table, hands folded, eyes calm. Across from me, Richard adjusted his tie, beads of sweat already gathering at his temples. Margaret kept her gaze low, her hand clamped on Sophie's wrist as though squeezing silence into her. Ethan sat further down, his shoulders curved, eyes fixed on the floor. My attorney rose with quiet authority, carrying a stack of binders heavier than any sword. He didn't rush. He didn't perform. He simply laid one binder on the stand, opened it, and held up the first page. "Exhibit A," he announced. 7 years of monthly wire transfers from Mrs. Parker's personal account directly to accounts owned by Ethan Parker and managed by Richard Caldwell. He read the dates one by one, his voice steady. December 5th, 2016, $14,000. January 7th, 2017, $12,000. February 11th, 2017, $10,000. On and on, the rhythm of numbers ringing like a metronome of sacrifice. The judge leaned closer. Jurors scribbled notes. I looked out across the benches. The room was full. Not just press, not just spectators, but citizens of Spokane who had come to see what kind of woman could topple a family as powerful as the Caldwells. Their faces shifted with each page turned. Doubt softened. Sympathy sharpened. Next came the credit card bills. "Exhibit B," my lawyer said, sliding copies across the table. "Furniture for the Caldwell estate, paid in full by Mrs. Parker. Luxury clothing purchases charged to her account. A $28,000 kitchen remodel, paid not by Richard Caldwell, but by the widow sitting before you." Gasps rippled through the benches. A man whispered, "All of it? Her money?" His neighbor shook her head slowly, eyes pinned on the Caldwells. Richard shifted in his seat, his jaw tight. "Irrelevant," he muttered, loud enough for those around him to hear. But his voice cracked on the last syllable. Then came the texts. My lawyer read them out loud, each word like a dagger. Linda, could you cover this month's utilities? Linda, the tax bill came in higher than expected. Can you handle it? Linda, we need new flooring for the living room. The old one looks dated. The room tilted. Every juror, every guest, every reporter could see it. The Caldwells weren't victims. They were parasites. Margaret's composure broke first. She bent forward, face buried in her handkerchief. Not tears of sorrow, tears of humiliation. Sophie sat stiff, her face blank, as if the evidence had emptied her. Finally, my lawyer held up the contract, the one that had gutted me when I first found Ethan's signature scrawled at the bottom. Exhibit C, a power of attorney signed by Ethan Parker, giving Richard Caldwell access to Linda Parker's trust fund. He paused, letting the weight of betrayal settle into the room. Executed without her knowledge, executed in silence. The judge lifted his brow. His voice was calm but cutting. Mr. Parker, is this your signature? Ethan's lips trembled. He opened his mouth, closed it, then finally whispered, Yes. The silence that followed was not silence at all. It was the roar of judgment unspoken. Gasps, whispers, the shifting of bodies as people turned toward him with eyes full of disbelief and scorn. I rose, slow and steady. My hands rested on the polished wood before me as I spoke directly to the room, my voice sharp as glass. You read the headlines, you saw the stories calling me unstable. Tonight, you've seen the truth. 7 years of evidence, 7 years of support disguised as exploitation. They called me bitter because I stopped paying for their luxuries. They called me unstable because I refused to be silent. But bitterness doesn't create receipts. Instability doesn't produce contracts. This, I tapped the pile of documents, is reality. Richard shot to his feet, his voice cracking. This is character assassination. She's twisting everything. We gave her a place in our family. I turned, my eyes cutting into his. You gave me nothing. I gave you everything. And when I stopped, you tried to destroy me with lies. But lies don't survive in the light of truth. Not in this courtroom. The judge struck his gavel, restoring order, but not before the damage was done. The room had seen the Caldwells' empire crumble in black and white. I sat again, calm as I'd been when I entered. The documents spoke louder than any scream. The Caldwells could sneer, they could shout, they could drown in their own arrogance, but the theater of truth had already ended. Justice, I realized, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply lays the evidence bare and lets the silence condemn those who thought they were untouchable. And in that silence, the Caldwells were already defeated. The courthouse emptied slowly, the echo of footsteps bouncing off marble walls. I stepped outside into the cold Spokane air, the sky a pale gray curtain ready to break into snow. Cameras still flashed, reporters still called my name, but I walked through them like fog. Their noise couldn't touch me anymore. That was when I saw him. Ethan. He stood alone at the bottom of the steps, his shoulders sagging, his eyes hollow. His suit hung wrinkled on his frame, and the dark circles under his eyes looked older than his 35 years. He looked like a man who had carried shame for too long and finally buckled beneath it. "Mom," he whispered, his voice hoarse, almost broken. "Mom, I was wrong." I stopped 2 steps above him, the crowd still buzzing around us, though their voices felt distant. His lips trembled as he spoke again. "I've lost everything. Sophie's gone. Her parents, they cut ties. Richard won't even look at me. I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do." I let the silence sit between us, sharp as glass. Then I answered, my words steady. "You haven't lost everything. You still have your life. But you will have to live with the choices you made." His knees seemed to weaken. He reached for the railing, gripping it like it was the only thing holding him upright. "I betrayed you. My own mother. I signed away the trust. I listened to them instead of you. And now—" His voice cracked, raw with despair. "Now, I'm nothing. I stepped closer, my gaze unflinching. You are not nothing, Ethan, but you are a man who has to face consequences, and for the first time, you will have to pay your own debts. Tears welled in his eyes, though he tried to swallow them back. I thought Sophie loved me. I thought Richard respected me. They told me you were holding me back, that I needed to prove myself by standing with them, and I believed it. I let them poison me against you. I let his confession hang in the cold air, then asked, sharp as a blade, "And did it make you stronger? Did it make you free?" He shook his head, his voice breaking. "No, it made me a coward. It made me your enemy, and I hate myself for it." For a moment, I saw not the man who had betrayed me, but the boy I once carried through hospital corridors when he had pneumonia, the boy who clung to my hand on his first day of school. That boy was still there, but buried beneath layers of pride and weakness. I drew a slow breath. Ethan, remorse is not enough. Words are not enough. You will have to rebuild from the ground up, without Sophie, without Richard, without Margaret whispering in your ear. You will have to stand on your own feet, or you will never stand at all. He sank onto the courthouse steps, burying his face in his hands. I don't know how. I don't even know where to start. I looked down at him, my voice firm but not without mercy. You start by accepting the pain you caused, by working, by paying back what you owe, not to me, but to yourself. You start by being a man your father would recognize again. The name landed like a stone in water. Ethan lifted his head slowly, his eyes wet, his voice trembling. Dad would hate me. I shook my head. No, he would hate your choices. But he would want you to rise again. That's what he always wanted for you. For the first time that night, Ethan broke. His sobs were not quiet. They were loud, unrestrained, the kind that makes strangers stop and stare. He wasn't just grieving what he had lost. He was grieving the man he should have been. I didn't reach for him. Not yet. This was a storm he had to weather himself. When his sobs finally slowed, he looked up at me, his face streaked with tears. Do you still love me, Mom?" My throat tightened, but my voice stayed firm. Always. But love does not erase consequences. Love doesn't mean I carry you anymore. It means I want you to carry yourself. His shoulders shook again, but this time he nodded. Slowly, painfully, but he nodded. The crowd had dispersed now. The cameras had gone. It was just us on those courthouse steps, mother and son. The wreckage of betrayal still between us, but something fragile beginning to form again. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the possibility of it. I turned toward the street, my coat wrapped tight against the wind. Come find me when you've learned how to stand, Ethan. Not before. I walked away, leaving him sitting there under the cold gray sky. Behind me I heard his voice, small, broken, but certain. I will, Mom. I will. For the first time in years, I believed he might. The snow fell heavy that night, soft flakes drifting like feathers from the black sky. My porch light glowed against the storm, casting a halo on the steps where Ethan knelt. His knees pressed into the frozen wood, his hands clasped together as though prayer alone could turn back time. His voice cracked with desperation. Mom, give me one more chance. His breath rose in shaky clouds. His hair, once neat, now clung damp against his forehead. His eyes, red, swollen, pleading, searched mine with a hunger I hadn't seen since he was a child, begging me to stay by his bed during thunderstorms. I stood above him, wrapped in my coat, the snow clinging to my shoulders. My heart twisted, but my voice stayed firm. Ethan, I forgive you. But forgiveness is not a reset button. Forgiveness is not forgetting. He shook his head, tears spilling onto the snow. I'll prove myself, Mom. I'll work. I'll rebuild. I'll do anything. Just don't shut me out of your life. I crouched down, my hand settling on his shoulder, firm, not tender. He flinched, not from the cold, but from the weight of my truth. Listen to me carefully. I will always be your mother. That will never change. But I am no longer a wallet you can open when the world closes on you. If you want me in your life, you must build it with respect, not dependence. Do you understand? His lips quivered, as though each word cut him deeper than the wind could. I do. I swear I do. I studied him, searching his face for signs of sincerity, and for the first time in years, I saw the boy I once knew, buried, bruised, but alive beneath the man who had betrayed me. That was enough to offer him a bridge, but not enough to carry him across it. I pulled my hand back, straightened, and pointed toward the street. Then go. Prove it. Not with promises, with action. Build something worthy of your own name, Ethan. Only then will you know what it means to stand beside me as a man, not as a dependent. His shoulders shook as sobs tore from his chest. The sound was raw, the sound of a man tasting humility for the first time. He pressed his forehead into the snow at my feet, whispering between tears, "Thank you for forgiving me. Thank you for still seeing me as your son." I turned toward the door, the golden light of my home spilling onto the porch. My hand rested on the handle, but I looked back once more. Ethan, forgiveness is a gift. Don't waste it, because I will never hand it to you twice. His eyes widened with the weight of my words. He nodded, swallowing hard, his face wet with tears and snow. "I won't, Mom. I swear I won't." "So?" I opened the door and stepped into the warmth, the smell of pine and cinnamon wrapping around me. Behind me, Ethan remained kneeling in the storm, the snow burying his shadow bit by bit. Inside, the Christmas lights flickered gently, casting a soft glow on the walls. For the first time in years, I felt no chains on my shoulders. I was free, not because I had cut him off, but because I had drawn the line he needed to face. He wept outside, but I stepped into the light. Not cold, not cruel, but resolute, because forgiveness was mine to give, and boundaries were mine to keep. Rosa's house glowed like a lantern in the snow. Warm light spilled from every window, and laughter floated into the night air. Inside, the tree glittered with ornaments collected over decades. Children darted between the couch and the fire, their voices rising like bells, their cheeks flushed from playing outside. I sat on the armchair near the fire, a glass of wine in my hand. Rosa leaned beside me, her apron dusted with flour, her eyes kind. "Linda," she said with a smile, "you belong here. You've always belonged here." I breathed in the scent of roasted chestnuts and pine. For the first time in weeks, I let myself feel stillness. No courtrooms, no betrayals, no voices raised in greed, just peace. Then my phone vibrated. I almost didn't look, but curiosity tugged at me. It was Ethan. The message glowed on the screen, simple and raw. "Mom, I lost $105 million, but what I truly lost was your trust." My hand lingered over the phone, my reflection caught in the glass. A younger version of me might have cried. A weaker version might have rushed to console him. But the woman I had become read his words with calm clarity. I placed the phone down on the table, untouched. The fire cracked, and Rosa's granddaughter climbed onto my lap, holding a paper ornament shaped like a star. "This is for you," she said shyly. I smiled, tucking the little star into my palm. "Thank you, sweetheart." Around me, the house rang with joy that needed no money, no luxury, no false displays of prestige. These children, this old friend, this night, they were proof that family wasn't built on inheritance or power. It was built on love freely given and respect earned. I raised my glass of wine, the reflection of the Christmas lights dancing in its surface. "Sometimes," I said quietly, though Rosa heard me, "loss is the greatest gift. It teaches us who truly stands by us. It strips away illusion and shows us who family really is." Rosa touched her glass to mine. "To new beginnings," she whispered. I sipped, the warmth sliding through me, steady and certain. Outside, snow drifted over Spokane like a clean white sheet, covering the scars of the past year. My phone buzzed again, but I didn't reach for it. Not tonight. Tonight was not about missed calls or broken promises. Tonight was about survival, dignity, and the light of a Christmas that belonged to me on my own terms. The children sang softly in the background, their little voices wrapping around the room like a lullaby. I leaned back, my smile faint but real. Justice had been served, boundaries had been drawn, and forgiveness had been given, but on my terms, not theirs. That was the true gift. Fade out in the golden glow of lights, wine lifted in my hand as the snow fell steady beyond the window.